So 2019 is already halfway over. That means it's time for me to give my picks for the best, the worst, the biggest disappointments, and the best surprises of 2019 thus far. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your picks for the best, the worst, the biggest surprises, and the biggest disappointments of the year. As we go into this, I can tell you right now, I'm gonna have some in my disappointed section that some of you have in your best category and vice versa. We're going to disagree. That's awesome that we can all see the same movies and get something different out of them and have fun discussions. Just don't be a jerk about it. And this list is only going from January through June, so Spider-Man's not in the video, Midsummer's not in consideration for this. This is January 1st through the end of June. That's what we're looking at. One final thing before we get started. People ask me almost every single day, where do I get my posters? Where do I get my Funkos? And what equipment do I use for my videos? There's a link down below in the description that answers those questions and where you can pick them up if you're so interested in them. With that said, let's get started and let's kick things off talking about the bad, and in no particular order. Kicking things off is Replicas. This is a sci-fi thriller starring Keanu Reeves with a pretty good concept about replicating people and the ability to manipulate memories and things like that, but every single thing that they do with a pretty good concept for a movie is dreadful. The cast is right, the premise is good, but every decision of what you could do with the story and how they escalate things, how they add tension into it, where they kind of go with things, it just makes you hate everybody inside of the movie, and it just doesn't work. Next up is going to be What Men Want. So this is a remake of a film from about 20 years ago that starred Mel Gibson. And over time, it's kind of been viewed as kind of this misogynistic film about him turning into a womanizer and gender stereotypes. So for some reason, they remade it in the year 2019. And there's not, I don't know, like, I watched it about a month ago when it came out at Redbox, and nothing about it stuck in my mind other than how unpleasant all the characters are. They're just written to be just such jerks to each other, manipulative, biting at each other, and then we're supposed to like them in the second half of the film as all the revelations happen, but it was just a comedy that wasn't funny, with characters that I didn't want to go on an adventure with, and a premise that seemed outdated over 10 years ago, so not a fan. Then we have Greta. This is a film that, once again, had an interesting concept about what if there was kind of a young girl that made friends with an older lady, and then it turned out the older lady was kind of crazy and just kind of got weirder and weirder. Started off pretty good, very solid performances inside of it, and then as it just went along, it just seemed like it spiraled out of control for me. It just got so ludicrous, so predictable, and every time anyone did anything, you just thought to yourself, why didn't they call someone before going in? Why didn't they do this? Wouldn't they notice this? Huh? I mean, it just didn't make any sense, and so I just couldn't buy into it as it went along. I was tracking with it until probably about the halfway point, and so it's kind of slow. It wasn't great or anything, and then the second half, when all the shenanigans started getting bonkers, where it should really start getting more interesting, it just strained way too much credibility, and I just did not enjoy it. Next up, it's called Last Summer. This is a Netflix original film. My wife appeared on a podcast with my friend Rachel Wagner, and they were talking about a set of Netflix original films. So I ended up watching this one with my wife, and I'm not the target audience for it, but it's like a coming-of-age story that thinks that all teenagers do is boink each other, and that just doesn't appeal to me. So, like, mediocre acting with generic coming-of-age dating relationship type stuff that just none of it drew me in. None of it was interesting. None of it was memorable. It was just generic coming-of-age stuff in the 21st century, and with a heavy focus on teenagers boinking each other, so did not work for me. And the last one we'll put in here is Captive State. This one was pretty heartbreaking for me. I debated putting it in the disappointment section, but it was bad enough that it's not just a disappointment. I just thought it was one of the worst movies that I've seen this year. So it's from the director of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which I thought was really good. And just it's the way that it was able to build tension and conflict and take a ludicrous premise and make it believable, make it feel grounded in the real world, turning this Caesar the ape into the lead character and making him more compelling than the human characters. So great at that. So when I saw that he was doing a sci-fi thriller film with John Goodman in it and a bunch of other great actors. I was very excited. Just even the basic concept of the trailer about alien invasion and kind of political aspects of that seemed really good. The movie itself, I just thought was a disjointed mess of, it felt a little bit to me like they made one movie and then it didn't test well, and so then they tried to recut it and they brought another editor in and they did some rewrites and some reshoots and they tried to do all this stuff to fix it and it didn't come together right. That's what it feels like. I haven't found anything, articles saying that's what happened, but that's the nature of the film for me, because the first 30 minutes follows a couple of characters. It uses one storytelling technique, and then you get to the middle act of the film, and literally our lead character from the first 30 minutes is put in a box or an office. He's boxed into an office, and he gets trapped inside of it. And while he's trapped in the box, then it tells for 30 minutes, we follow these other characters on this whole adventure. The storytelling techniques change. Everything's wildly different. And then at the end of that sequence with them, they let the guy out of the box and we start following him again, which is such a weird way to tell a story. Disjointed. It seemed like someone took over in the storytelling process. And then as you get to the end, it's not particularly satisfying. You don't know who you're supposed to root for because of the way they told the story. I didn't care about anyone. And you get to the end and you're like, oh, okay, all right, maybe if I rewatched this, it would be a little bit more exciting, but you told it in a way that did not the power moments didn't hit, the twists weren't like aha moments, and it just wasn't pleasant at all for me. From there, let's move on to the biggest surprises of the year, and all of these for me are going to actually be Netflix original films. And the reason they're surprises is because Netflix isn't great at promoting their movies, so these ones kind of came out of the blue for me as films that I just checked them out and I went, I actually really like that. First up will be Triple Frontier. This is like a heist thriller about the consequences of greed and not sticking to a plan, and I just thought it was such a nice. This is the type of movie that I want Netflix to make, in that it's not necessarily needing to be this big, gigantic blockbuster film with big CGI and everything like that. It's like a solid cast with a simple premise. It builds tension throughout. Some people were disappointed because it was too slow paced or there wasn't a big shootout or anything like that. But that's not really what the movie was. And so it didn't bother me at all that it didn't lead towards that. I liked what the movie delivered. Now, yesterday, some rumors came out, speculation, reports on Netflix and how they're changing their model of doing movies. And they pointed at this film flopping as the reason that they're doing that, because this movie apparently had a $115 million budget, which is like twice as much as I thought that this movie cost. I actually wrote my notes for this before I read this article, and I was like, oh wow, that's interesting the way that played out. But so yeah, I hope Netflix can figure out a way to get their budgets under control so we can still get movies like this, but without spending an obscene amount of money. Next up will be Always Be My Maybe, another Netflix original. This one is a rom-com that just such a pleasant, charming comedy. Likewise, a relatable rom-com. Like, it has the shenanigans that you have in rom-coms that kind of pull two very different people together, but it has much more of a basis in reality of the nature of the way we have people that we interact with at different phases in life, and then how we can be torn apart, brought back together, and therefore it felt more like people you could actually know rather than, those rom-coms from 15 years ago where it was just some ludicrous concept to set up ridiculous things. No, this one was much more grounded. It has all the laughs, but it's all organic in the way it plays out. The leads are charming, and there's a fantastic cameo in this film. I don't want to tell you who it is. It's in the trailer, so you know who it is if you've seen the trailer. There's like a 10-minute segment with an A-list actor in it that is just knocks it out of the park. Fantastic. But in general, this is a very good rom-com. And the last one on here, it's a twofer. The two different Fyre Fest documentaries. There was one on Hulu and there's one on Netflix, and they complement each other really well. And if you don't know what the Fyre Festival is, I don't want to spoil it for you. Someone told me enough about it that it's spoiled a little bit. I'll just say that there was a music festival that was supposed to happen a few years ago with a bunch of rich influencer people, and it's the most bonkers, insane story you've ever heard. And I don't want to tell you, like I said, I don't want to spoil what happens, but watch the one on Netflix first, and then watch the one on Hulu. And there's a guy that you really want them to interview in the Netflix one, and they keep telling stories about him, but they didn't interview him, but they got him for the Hulu one. And so they complement each other really well on the way that they view this same event from different perspectives. But I mean, I hadn't heard anything about this actual real life event that happened. And so checking out these documentaries, like, wow, that is bizarre, fascinating. I'm so glad that this got documented and is so amazing that this is a real life event. Then we'll move on to our biggest disappointments of the year. And I'll tell you right now, I'm about to step on some of your toes. Some of you are going to get really mad at me for what I'm about to say. And I'm not trying to take anything away from you, that you loved this film. I totally get it that you loved it. For me, I had some problems with this film. Kicking things off with Us. Coming out of Get Out, I was so excited for whatever Jordan Peele was going to do next. The trailers for Us were fascinating, and it looked like a nice little home invasion film with a little bit of a twist and something to say inside of it. I went to go see Us with a few of my friends that were equally excited to see this film, and we're tracking along with it for the first 75%. And then whenever they left the house and the movie started to kind of reveal what was going on in that third act of the film, it just unraveled for me. The craftsmanship of the home invasion side to it, his ability to visualize things, the performance, all fantastic. But he made a story that was supposed to have some sort of like basis in reality that I'm supposed to be able to buy into the story happening here, and then the revelations of the third act of the film, I don't think they were remotely believable. There wasn't enough logic to it. It made me raised way more questions than it answered. And then even on the level to which, there's all this symbolism and these themes and saying stuff about the underclass and the people that aren't noticed, none of it landed for me. So the home invasion part I thought worked, performances worked, the visualization worked, the actual resolution to all of it and what everything was trying to say, I just didn't think it worked at all. And so in the end, the third act made it feel just pretentious to me, like someone trying to say something really big and not successfully doing it. I know a lot of you guys loved it, though. I'm not trying to convince you otherwise, but it didn't work all that well for me. Next up will be Velvet Buzzsaw. This is the follow-up from the creative team behind the movie Nightcrawler. I thought Nightcrawler was fantastic. Such a cool thriller with Jake Gyllenhaal. And then this film, it was trying to be like art house. It was trying to be a commentary on elitists. It's trying to be a horror film, a dark comedy, satire. It's trying to do all these different things, and I didn't think any of them landed at all. And in trying to like satirize being pretentious, people came off a little bit pretentious in its own way, so I just did not care for this one much at all. Next up is Glass. Now, I liked Glass. I did give it a positive review. I rewatched it with my wife and basically landed in the exact same place on second viewing at home that I liked it. But coming as the follow-up to Unbreakable that I waited 19 years for, it really falls short of what it should have been. Elements to it are really good, but at the same time, throughout almost the whole movie, it felt like we didn't get enough David Dunn. We didn't get enough satisfying stuff of him doing his thing, probably because there was a limited budget, and so they wanted to do a more restrictive environment, so we're at the cuckoo nest the whole movie. And then the whole movie's teasing us that we're going to get this big finale showdown, and that's not really the way the movie plays out. It subverts our expectations, and Shyamalan does his old bag of tricks and changes things up on us. And it's not that they were it's not that they were terrible ideas. There's some interesting concepts in there, but the specific execution made you feel like, oh, well, I mean, you did something different. You did surprise me, and there's just some interesting layers that you're adding. But I really kind of wanted to see some of the stuff that you were just teasing, and what you gave me left me feeling disappointed that I didn't get that. And I'll just say some of the things that happen in that final fight, especially something involving a little puddle of water, I just thought was an offensive way to resolve certain storylines. I mean, just unbelievably, how is that what got left in? How did no one say, no, man, you gotta do another revision of this script on this plot point right here. This does not work. And so while I thought it was good, it wasn't a Shyamalan embarrassment. It was definitely a disappointment. Next up on here will be Dark Phoenix. Now, I thought about not including this one on here because I wasn't thinking that this movie was going to be good. I always had a bad vibe about it. The trailers seemed like bland X-Men stuff, but it was really bland X-Men stuff. And the even bigger disappointment is how little it connected with people. And, it came out and debuted like under $30 million. So we're closing out the Fox X-Men franchise. I mean, I know New Mutants coming out next year, but of actual X-Men proper films, we're closing out this 19-year-old franchise with the biggest dud. And that is a disappointment in and of itself. And then the movie, also a disappointment, an unsatisfying resolution that characters seem like they're acting out of character. The villains are unbelievably bland. We know a little bit about why that they had to change things up to be less like Captain Marvel, but no matter what the reason was, it's just a dull film, unfortunately, and so it was a big disappointment. Final big disappointment, the whole month of June besides Toy Story. Now, if you watched my reviews all throughout the month of June, I gave a lot of like B's and me minuses, because I like franchise films. I like blockbusters. I'm easy to please with safe entertainment, but it's a month of films that were all like, that's what you did with Men in Black. That's what you did with X-Men. That's what you did. And you just kind of list off these franchises, and they all just kind of felt right there in that mediocre middle. It's the month of meh. Just not much that made a big impact. And so as a whole, the month of June was just a string of pretty good enough remakes, sequels, reboots, stuff like that didn't make much of an impact, and a lot of them just disappointed at the box office in general. From there, I will give my top 5 of the year thus far. Coming in at number 5 is How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. So this was just such a pleasant finale to a very strong trilogy. I thought the villain in this film might be the best villain out of all of the 3 films. He has a little bit more characterization in outsmarting people, and the way he's used throughout the story just makes him someone you connect with a little bit better as a villain. As always, the visuals here are fantastic. They found new layers to add into it to continue to show these characters growing up. Especially when you watch this film, then you go watch the first one again, you just realize you have truly watched these characters grow up throughout these films. And then where it ends in the final scene is just such a nice bookend to a very solid trilogy that'll put a smile on your face and maybe make you cry a little bit. At number 4 is Fighting with My Family. This is another one that would be in my surprises list, but I included it here, so I didn't need to include it in my surprises list. This movie was not on my radar. I don't follow professional wrestling. I just saw that the movie had come out. I was hearing some good buzz about it. I only watched the trailer right before I went to go see it in the theater, and then I just loved it. I thought it works on so many different levels. It's a comedy, but the comedy doesn't come from ridiculous shenanigans. It comes from these quirky characters that are put inside the film. It has plenty of drama inside of it, but the drama comes from our characters' faults. It has all of the moments that you want inside of a sports movie, but it kind of gives us a different path to get there. It subverts our expectations in the good way. It doesn't just subvert our expectations for the sake of subverting them. It sets characters up as the sports movie tropes and Mean Girls and things like that, but then it reveals that maybe they're not that way, that our lead characters have faults and they missee things. And so the drama, a bit heavier, it has all the sports moments, it's got the comedy, it's got a little bit of everything that I love from sports movies, so I just loved this movie. Coming in third place is Dragged Across Concrete. This is from director Craig S. Zoller, who previously did Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99. And after I saw those films, I was very excited to see what he's going to do next. Found out that this one was going to have Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson, and I was sold immediately. If you're not familiar with his work, he's kind of doing a Tarantino type thing. He does slow burn films that are written differently than most films. They're more novel-esque or play-esque in this, that the scenes and sequences are very long, and they have a lot of dialogue inside of them, and they're slow burns with sudden bursts of violence inside of them. And so I've been a big fan of all 3 of his films. They're distinct cinematic experiences. They're not for everyone. A lot of you would see this and think it's really slow, but if like you like Tarantino, His films are definitely worth checking out for something somewhat in that vein. I mean, he has a distinct voice. He's not trying to rip off Tarantino, but there's just similarities in the darkness, the adult themes, the kind of criminal underworld, the pacing, the strong dialogue, and worth checking out if you're into Tarantino. My runner-up for the best of the first half of the year is Avengers Endgame. Now, of course, I've done plenty of videos all about this film and how it's a true epic, fantastic finale with some of the best moments in the entire MCU, some of the best fan service of all time. The whole movie has solid laughs throughout it, deep emotions throughout the film. Just feel like you feel a weight as you watch this film. At times it's the most sentimental film inside of the MCU, but then as I've mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of the execution of the big Thorbowski plotline. I thought that was played too much for laughs and trying to find that line between trying to be a dramatic exploration of depression and people, how they deal with failure, regret, and things like that, and then just making the punchline of a joke. I thought they went too far, and when you have him in the fat suit and setting him up for all these jokes, it starts to feel like an SNL parody as opposed to an actual exploration. And so that was a pretty big thing that knocked it back. And also the first 2 hours of this film, are really light on action. And for a big blockbuster, like I felt that each of the 3 times that I've seen this film. So while I love many aspects of this film, I don't think it's quite the perfect MCU film. But coming in first place for me thus far is Toy Story 4, a film that I was as cynical about as anyone, skeptical about as anyone. I was not crazy about the trailers, and then the movie won me over. And over the last month, since people have seen it, there's been a lot of discussion as to how do you rank them, and a lot of people have this one as their last one. A lot of people still have the third one as their favorite of the bunch. But for me, with the specific themes where this film went and what it did with Woody and kind of where it landed, it just connected a little bit better with me and kind of pulled some different emotions out of me that I think it connected with. I think different age ranges connect with these movies differently, and that's a good thing. And likewise, the movies that you might have grown up with resonate with parts of you and with your childhood nostalgia in unique ways that they don't resonate with me because I didn't see those movies as a child. I didn't grow up watching them. I watched them, the first couple, when I was in middle and high school, and then the third one came out when I was like 30 years old, and this one when I'm older than 30 years old. And so this one resonated with me because I felt like it was more of a film about parenting and letting go, and that's a different type of thing that kind of connected with me in different ways. So that's why, for me, that was my favorite of the Toy Story films, one of my favorite Pixar films, and I think they absolutely found a reason for this film to exist, and I didn't really have any problems with it, so for me, it's my number one of the year thus far. Be sure to share your picks down below. Remember, I've got that link where you can find out where I got my pictures, Funkos, all of my equipment that I use. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.